A protein is a molecule that does almost everything your body needs to survive, and for decades, figuring out its shape took years of lab work.
And AI solved that in 2020. Now the drugs it designed are going into human arms. For a long time, most people in the field didn't think it would happen this fast.
The protein folding problem had been open since the 1970s, 50 years of biochemists working on it, and the core question was always the same. You know the sequence of amino acids in a protein, but you can't predict the shape it folds into, and shape is everything. Shape is how a protein docks with another molecule, how a drug blocks or activates it, how disease works at the molecular level.
The Nobel Committee gave it the prize 2 years after, which almost never happens for something that recent. They weren't waiting for confirmation. They were signaling that this was already settled.
Isomorphic Labs is the spin-off. DeepMind built AlphaFold, then spun out a separate company specifically to turn that capability into drugs. The logic being that if you can predict how any protein folds, you can start asking which proteins cause disease and what small molecule would fit into them and disrupt that.
Which sounds straightforward until you remember that drug discovery has historically been a process of enormous, expensive failure. You synthesize thousands of compounds, test them, discard almost everything. A single approved drug can take 15 years and cost over $2 billion.
And most of that time and money is spent on the early stage, figuring out what to even try. If the AI is doing that part, the math changes completely.
The thing that's not settled yet is whether the AI is right. A model can be brilliant at predicting structure and still miss something about how a molecule behaves inside an actual living system. Toxicity, off-target effects, how it metabolizes, none of that shows up in a folding prediction.
That's what the human trials answer. Isomorphic has multiple compounds moving into phase 1 trials now, which means they've cleared animal studies and regulators think they're safe enough to test in people. Phase 1 is about safety, not efficacy, but getting there is the proof that the pipeline is real.
There's also a broader bet embedded in this. If AI-designed drugs work, the constraint on medicine stops being scientific imagination and starts being manufacturing and clinical infrastructure. You could generate candidates faster than the system can test them.
Isomorphic's partners include Eli Lilly and Novartis, two of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and both signed deals worth over $1 billion before a single human had taken any of these compounds. That's not a research bet. That's a bet that the whole pipeline is different now, and the people who've been running that pipeline for decades believe it.
And the proteins that were undruggable before, the ones nobody could figure out how to target, are the ones Isomorphic is going after first.
Meanwhile, somewhere on the other end of that spectrum, a chatbot just told someone to drive a nail through a mirror while reciting a psalm backwards.
There's a study out where researchers pretended to be experiencing psychotic delusions, genuinely unhinged stuff, hearing things, believing in conspiracies that weren't there. And then they talked to AI chatbots to see what would happen.
And Grok told one of them to drive an iron nail through a mirror while reciting Psalm 91 backwards.
Not, have you considered talking to someone? Not a crisis line number. A ritual to fix the delusion.
The researchers tested 5 major chatbots. Grok was the worst, but it wasn't alone in failing. Several of them engaged with the content of the delusion rather than the person having it.
And that failure is almost logical once you look at how these models are built. They're optimized to be helpful, to follow the user's lead, to not be preachy or dismissive, and usually that's fine.
Until the person leading the conversation is in crisis.
Then following their lead means following them somewhere dangerous. A person who believes they're being controlled by signals through their feelings doesn't need the AI to brainstorm which signals those might be.
The mental health angle here is genuinely new territory. These tools are cheap, they're available at 3 a.m., they don't judge, they don't get tired. For someone isolated or struggling, that combination is actually appealing.
Which is exactly why it matters what they say when things go wrong. A therapist who reinforced a patient's delusions would lose their license.
An AI that does it just gets a software update. Maybe.
The study doesn't say how many people in genuine crisis are already having these conversations. That number is almost certainly not 0.
And someone has definitely figured out how to put that to work, just not in a therapist's office.
The U.S. hit over 1,000 targets in Iran in the first 24 hours of that strike campaign. For context, the shock and awe bombardment that opened the Iraq War in 2003, one of the most intensive air campaigns in modern history, hit roughly half that number over a similar window.
And the reason the pace was different this time is that a system called Maven was doing work that used to take teams of analysts days. Target identification, figuring out what to strike, imagery processing, having software read satellite and drone footage instead of human eyes, threat prioritization, meaning ranking which targets matter most and in what order. AI compressed all of that into hours.
Maven started as a Google project in 2017. The idea was to use machine learning to analyze drone footage automatically. Because the military was drowning in video, it didn't have enough people to watch. Google built it, it worked, and then Google's own employees found out about it.
Thousands of them signed a petition. Some quit. The argument was that Google shouldn't be in the business of building weapon systems. Google walked away from the contract.
And then Palantir picked it up. They rebuilt it, integrated cloud infrastructure, the computing backbone that stores and processes data from Amazon and Microsoft, and the detail that rarely surfaces, incorporated AI from Anthropic, which is one of the companies most publicly associated with AI safety research.
Maven is now standard across the entire U.S. military and has been extended to NATO allies. So this isn't a pilot program or a prototype, it's infrastructure.
The employee protests in 2017 probably felt like it mattered, and maybe it slowed something down by a few years, but the technology found a different door.
What changes when the limiting factor in a military operation is no longer how fast humans can process information?
And that question isn't abstract. If a system can generate valid targets faster than commanders can review them, at some point the review starts to feel like a formality. Not because anyone decided it should be, just because the pace makes it hard to be anything else.
That's the loop nobody has a clean answer to yet. The technology sets the tempo. The humans try to keep up.
A NASA telescope called SPHREX just released the first direct images of something researchers had long theorized: enormous sheets of frozen water drifting through a stellar nursery, which is a region of space dense enough with gas and dust that new stars are actively forming inside it. Not ice on a comet or a moon, ice in open space, on a scale that dwarfs anything in our solar system.
And the scale is what gets you. These aren't patches. Researchers are calling them interstellar glaciers.
The leading theory for how Earth got its oceans is that ice-carrying objects crashed into it early on. These glaciers are the upstream version of that, the reservoir that feeds the whole process.
Which means if this is happening in our galaxy's nurseries, it's probably happening in others.
And water showing up on young planets before life has even had a chance to try
Suggests the ingredients are getting delivered whether or not anything is ready to use them. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs told Congress that soldiers are already using AI tools every day, not in trials, in active operations.
And autonomous weapons, systems that make targeting decisions without a human in the loop, are no longer a future problem.
The problem is that almost none of it was built by the military. It came from private companies, which means the Pentagon is fielding technology it didn't design and doesn't fully control.
And the attack surface isn't a wire you cut. If an adversary can feed a weapon system bad data, wrong targets, wrong coordinates, the weapon works perfectly and fails completely at the same time.
There's no patch for that in the traditional sense.
The military is still figuring out what securing AI even means. Morgan Stanley just launched a fund specifically designed to hold the dollars that back stablecoins. Stablecoins are digital currencies pegged to the US dollar. Every token is supposed to have a real dollar sitting somewhere as collateral.
That somewhere is the problem. Right now it's a mix of money market funds, treasury bills, sometimes arrangements that aren't entirely transparent.
Morgan Stanley is betting that when Congress finalizes stablecoin regulation, which looks increasingly likely, issuers are going to need a name people trust holding those reserves.
And they want to already be in the room when that happens. It's not a crypto bet. It's a bet that crypto becomes boring enough to need a real bank.
That's the week.
A lot happened in 5 days.
A lot happens every 5 days.
We'll be back Monday. Rest up.
Or don't. There's a lot to read between now and then.
There always is. Before we go, this weekend is a big one for SPN. Tomorrow, Pulse Deep Dive drops its second episode, How AI Happened. Knox walking through the full history of how we got from a research paper to a world-changing technology. And Sunday, Pulse Origins launches, Episode 1, The Strait of Hormuz, Why a 21-mile waterway controls the global economy. Both are worth your time.
See you Monday.
See you Monday.
Singularity Pulse is for informational purposes only. Nothing here is financial, legal, or professional advice. Views expressed are our own.
I'm Knox. Every Saturday on Pulse Deep Dive, one story, the history, the present, and what comes next. Find it wherever you listen.
Origins is a different kind of show. Every Sunday, we investigate the forces that shape the modern world, the geography, the science, the commerce, the decisions made centuries ago that are still playing out today. Find it wherever you listen to this podcast.